quick FYI, we recorded this episode on Tuesday before the news that Lionel Messi has reportedly requested to leave Barcelona. So, if there's an absence of Messi-shaped discussion in this podcast, it's because we cut everything out because it was immediately totally irrelevant. We will redress this in future podcasts and potentially a future video, but for now, please enjoy all of this La Liga content, Lionel Messi free. Hello, and welcome to the Tifo Football Podcast. I'm Joe Devine, and today I'm joined by Alex Stewart.
Good morning, Joe.
Also, Seb Stafford-Bloor.
Hi, Joe.
And a special guest, Dermot Corrigan, who I've left a pause for, but he's not here yet, so he'll be joining us for the main thrust of today's episode, which, of course, is a Sensible Transfers episode, all about La Liga. That's the league in Spain, the top one. We talk today about teams such as Barcelona, Real Madrid, Valencia, Atletico Madrid, miscellaneous, which is just other things. Anyway, for now, I will leave you in the warm hands and the cool embrace of Dermot Corrigan. Okay, Dermot. Ramon Planes has succeeded Eric Abidal as the new technical director at Barcelona. Abidal was sacked last week. In fact, I don't know if this is true or not, but I saw a photograph that appeared to be taken through a window on Twitter. Is that a real photograph, or was that some clever spoof?
The photograph of Abidal with Setien. Yeah, it seemed to be a real photograph. It looked quite like a photographer got a tip off. That somebody had noticed that Abidal and Setien were having lunch together. Now, who gave him the tip off, we won't know, but it is true that around Barcelona there's a pretty close relationship between some of the local reporters and the people in the club, and there was a lot of choreography going on over the last couple of weeks, really, since they got knocked out by Bayern. Barca have been on, the Barca board anyway, have been on quite a big PR offensive to try to show that they're, especially the president is in charge, that, you know, it was an awful mess. It's very bad to lose 8-2 to Bayern Munich, obviously, but I'm here to sort it out. And part of that was the way that Setien went one day, then Abidal went the next day, and, you know, then Koeman arrived, and now he's trying to kick out some of the senior players. So yeah, it was an interesting photo to show up, and maybe just a little insight into how things tend to work in the way the Catalan media and the club.
Yeah, because it seemed, I mean, again, not sure if this is true or not, but it did seem like they were asking Eric Abidal to fire Setien, and then he was fired himself the next day, which seems like a cruel last task to ask.
Yeah, that's probably a little bit too organised exactly for Barcelona, the way that things work. Like, whether Setien knew he was going to be fired. I don't think, Setien showed up to any lunch with Abidal with his plan for next season and, all the players that he wanted to sign. And then he was surprised to learn that he wasn't going to be there doing the job. There are two guys who worked together, who've been through a lot together, and maybe they both had a feeling that they weren't going to last too long, and they went for lunch together. I would say that's more likely. Whether Abidal knew that he was about to be fired or not is not that clear, because, in the statement that Barca released saying Setien was sacked, it mentioned that the current technical department were going to work on putting together a new squad with the new coach, and Abidal at that stage was head of that technical department, and then 24 hours later he was gone, and Abidal himself has said since then that it was his decision to leave. There have been a lot of knives out. There's been a lot of jockeying for position, a lot of fingers pointing both in public and behind the scenes, and then in the leaks to the media. But in the end, Abidal has gone, and his reputation has taken a pretty bad turn over the last 6 months or so.
Damn it, with the decision to appoint Koeman, has anyone at Barcelona watched a Ronald Koeman team play over the last 5 years? Or is this just a decision based on the kind of familiarity of DNA? Yeah,
they've, more than having seen much of his Southampton or Everton teams, they've watched the video of him scoring the goal in 1992 that won Barcelona their first ever European Cup a lot. And that is ingrained in the minds of everybody at Barcelona. It's a huge moment for the club. It's maybe the biggest moment, even, it was the first time that they had won the Champions League, so you could argue that that's an even bigger moment than, Messi scoring in the Champions League against Manchester United or any of the the achievements later that Barca had never won a Champions League, and that's the turning point in their history. Another reason that they think it's a good idea to sign him is that they feel that he has the guy with the personality and the status and the character to be able to do the job of telling the senior players that they no longer want, that they're no longer wanted, and to be able to manage that situation. Whether that's actually true or not, remains to be seen. And there's evidence to suggest that maybe he's not the best person to give that task to. But they were short on options. There weren't that many people around who were willing to take the job and who were acceptable to the Barca fan base. And Koeman is the one who they've landed on.
Is it not quite a strange appointment politically? Am I right in thinking there's presidential elections in 2021? Is that right?
Yeah, the current board cannot go. There's elections have to be called by the next March or so in order to be held at the end of next season. And the current president Bartomeu cannot stand again for election. His term is up. So Koeman knows, and he said himself that he signed a 2-year contract, but that will be dependent on how this season goes. And he almost kind of said that he knows that he has to do really, really well in order to keep the job, because everybody who wants to be Barcelona president after Bartomeu is going to run on a platform of coming in and shaking everything up, clearing things out, especially at board level and coach level. And whether Xavi Hernandez is attached to one of the candidates who come in, he's very close to Victor Font, who has for a long time has been positioning himself to run as an opposition candidate to Bartomeu. Xavi, has a relationship with Victor Font for sure. Whether he will attach himself to that candidacy or whether he'll just wait and be the coach no matter who wins, we'll have to see. But Koeman will have to do very, very well, and will have to politically play it very, very well in order to keep the job past those elections.
Okay, so the new technical director, Roman Planes, he was Abidal's assistant, right? So what do we know about him already, Dermot?
He's a very experienced guy within Catalan football first, and then Spanish football generally. He came up as a sporting director. I'm not sure. I don't think he had a playing career, maybe as a semi-pro or that, but he wasn't. He's not a famous player at all, or not somebody who was known. He made his name as a sporting director with lower league Catalan teams, got himself to Espanyol, and was there at Espanyol at the time that Mauricio Pochettino was the coach, which there were some very good years at Espanyol. They had a very good team. Were challenging towards the top half of La Liga when Pochettino was there as coach. Then he went to Tottenham, didn't work out there, came back and was at another good number of different Spanish clubs. Elche, Rayo, Getafe, went back to Espanyol. So he's a guy, before coming into Barcelona, he's a guy with loads of contacts in the Spanish game. But maybe, and this is just my impression on it, that he has he's better contacts at the level to be hiring players for Getafe or Espanyol than at the very top at Barcelona. But the idea when he came in was maybe that he was the guy who Abidal, had the name, had the reputation, had maybe the contacts at the higher level amongst the superstar end of the game, and knew the players in the dressing room. Whereas Planes was the guy who had more experience of getting deals done, of the how the system works, if you know what I mean.
Okay, that's interesting. Well, listen, as far as the signings are, we have Miralem Pjanic has come in, Trincao, Pedri, Mateus Fernandez too, but clearly there's lots left to do. So before we get to new people coming in, should we start with people leaving? Dermot, who do you think will be leaving this summer?
That depends on whether the club president Bartomeu gets to do what he has said he will do, because he basically said that they're going to keep everybody. He drew a line almost at 30 and said everybody under 30 more or less is going to stay. That includes people like Griezmann or Semedo, or people who didn't have great seasons, and everybody over 30, with the exception of Lionel Messi, is going to go. So that means Suarez, Busquets, Jordi Alba, Gerard Piqué, people who've given most of them their whole careers, or the biggest part of their careers, to Barcelona, have won Champions Leagues and La Ligas and everything. The president more or less said that we're going to wipe these out and start again. Now that's easier said than done, as been writing on The Athletic, that these guys are on huge wages, some of the best played players in the world, and this is a very difficult market with all that's been happening in football and with everybody in the world over the last 6 months, that to just try to think you can move all these guys out is going to be very difficult. Koeman seems to have a more pragmatic approach, maybe to hang on to some of them and let others go, but as I was saying, the way that the things have been choreographed, there's been a lot of well-placed leaks to the local papers that Suarez, that Koeman doesn't want him, whether it's Koeman who doesn't want him or whether it's the club who've said that we need to get rid of this guy because he earns too much and we don't think he's any good anymore. Not sure, but it's going to be very difficult for them to get these guys off. So a lot of the transfer business that they do will depend on finding somebody who will take Suarez, or somebody who will sign Jordi Alba or Piqué or even Umtiti, guys like this who are on big wages but who haven't played so well recently. So
Alex, we've already covered Barcelona in a Sensible Transfers video, but let's go back over some of the areas that we needed to strengthen. In a WhatsApp conversation you and I had about Sergio Roberto, we kind of described him as less a right back, more just the guy that happens to play at right back. So picks for that area of the field, please.
Well, the obvious choice now that Ronald Koeman is there is Cucho Martina, who seems to be the one player that Koeman weirdly brings from one club to another, despite the fact that he's absolutely rubbish. It's a weird one because, of course, we did this video prior to the appointment. Clearly, there was, there had been rumblings about Setien even before the 8-2 defeat. And Koeman is coming in without, I don't think, as a Southampton fan, I remember his tenure there, but I don't think that there's necessarily a particular kind of style of player that he recruits. And it seems to me that, as Dermot has said, a lot of his job here is about cleaning out other people rather than bringing people in. So I think it's really, really difficult to say. The main pick that we had for this position in the video was Serginho Dest of Ajax. Obviously, the Dutch connection there is further strengthened by Koeman being there. Dest fits the profile of a young player, an exciting attacking player, somebody who has that kind of instinctive understanding of quick combination play, plenty of pace, the ability to excite fans, which I think is hugely important for Barcelona. And from a commercial perspective, as a US men's national team player, there's clearly a kind of, an exciting opportunity there. People will look at how, for example, Christian Pulisic has ignited an interest in Chelsea in the States, and maybe Barca will have that sort of thing in mind. But as Dermot's made very clear, a huge amount of the ability to conduct this sort of business is going to be predicated on getting rid of people on huge wages. So it's really hard to know whether Barcelona are even going to have the kind of money to spend that would require, or that would be required to bring in someone like Dest.
Talking of huge wages, let's move into midfield. Not a day seems to go past without Ivan Rakitic being linked with a move somewhere else, most recently Tottenham. Arturo Vidal is also probably one that's on a very high wage that the club could probably do with shedding. Sergio Busquets will stay there presumably until he wants to leave or to do otherwise. What are we doing in midfield in terms of the recalibration? What are we actually looking for first before we get to specific players?
I think that we, again, it's so difficult, and I'm not kind of hedging my bets here, but so I personally, I think that Frankie de Jong should be the person that you build that midfield around, probably actually as a 6 rather than as an 8, because his ability to link play, to break the first line of the press with his ball carrying, to orchestrate play from deep is really impressive. Obviously, there's a tension there because that's the Busquets role, but he may be one of these players who's on the way out. I think Barca will look to maintain the foundation of a midfield 3, and so therefore, alongside Frankie de Jong going forwards, you need to have somebody who is a sort of ball winner, a presser, somebody who can probably get up a little bit into the half spaces to assist with creation, but is mostly there to keep things tight, keep things solid, and instigate a press. And then on the other side, whether that's right or left, you want to have somebody who's more progressive, who gets up to support, who is kind of like an 8-10 sort of player. I think that's the kind of construction that most top-level teams would want to have if they see the deepest player as fundamentally the playmaker rather than as the ball winner. The balance that you get there, you might have a view towards maybe getting someone like Donny van der Beek across from Ajax. Obviously, he's got a relationship with Frankie de Jong. He can be that progressive, bursting forwards kind of player. I've always liked Sevilla's Joan Jordan for the right-hand side role, somebody who's a good presser, very tidy passer, but can also get forwards to support. Some of the Lyon midfielders, again, I think would work really well. So Houssem Aouar in that right-hand role who gets forward. Maxence Caqueret is the kind of presser, destroyer player, but with an ability to pass. But it's so hard to know because you've got a coach who's coming in who doesn't, I think, have a reputation for a particular style of play other than maybe a little bit pedestrian, who probably knows that he's got a year, whose main focus is on clearing out stuff. So, trying to predict what will happen in that midfield, which is such a crucial area, but is also the area where they are most stacked with the older players on high wages, is an incredibly difficult thing to do.
Dermot, are there any obvious candidates for this in the Spanish media, or any suggestions about how Barcelona are going to remedy this area of the pitch?
Not so much. Like, people have mentioned, Van der Beek's been mentioned a lot, and Wijnaldum from Liverpool has also been mentioned as somebody who might fit a little bit what Alex is saying there, as somebody with a lot of physicality and who can get forward into the box and provide goals, which they've been really missing from midfield, apart from Arturo Vidal, who they presume will be out. But a lot of the focus so far has been on the people who will leave, like Rakitic and like Vidal. And midfield is a big problem for Barca, but not something that they look to see, or from what we can gather from the leaks to the local media, is not a place that they're really looking to or that they know what they want to get next.
I think there's an argument potentially for trying to give people like Puig, maybe even Carlos Alenya, a run in that position to see if that works, because certainly with Puig, I think you've got a very, very good player there. Alenya impressed in the small bits that he played for Barca, didn't do very well in a struggling Betis team, but I think does have the makings of a good player. And it may be that's the sort of the easiest solution for Barca is to try and reuse some of these La Masia graduates to try and get the spirit of the club in midfield back. Obviously, it's so closely associated with Xavi and Iniesta and Busquets as that kind of trio. So there are sort of sentimental reasons almost for trying those players, because again, in a year's time, once they've had the election, there'll probably be a new coach in, and that's the point at which I think we'll see the rebuilding. So maybe this season is an opportunity to kind of have a holding pattern and use some younger players, younger Spanish players, and see how that goes.
Moving on to Real Madrid. Dermot, can you tell us a little bit about Eugenie Valderrama, who is the head of South American scouting at the club since 2014? Because we mentioned him in our Real Madrid Sensible Transfers video. He's been responsible for bringing in all sorts of players to the club, including Rodrigo, Vinicius Jr., Rainier, loaned to Dortmund. So who is he? Can you tell us anything about him?
Yeah, he's a fascinating character who has come a long way in a very short space of time to be, such an important guy responsible for, spending a lot of money at Real Madrid. He's from Brazil. He came to Spain first as a football sala player, a six-a-side indoor player, which is quite big in Spain. There's a professional league here, and he played in that. And while he was here in Madrid, he became friends with the Galacticos, Brazilian Galacticos, who were at Madrid around the same time. People like Ronaldo, Roberto Carlos, that era of Madrid, and kind of became part of their social circle. So got to know people inside Madrid at the club as well. Even became friends with, or as far as we can work out, one of Florentino Perez's sons, who were all enjoying themselves at the same time in the same places at that stage. He then worked for a while on Spanish TV as a pundit. He was on. He was very good on the TV talking about international football in a relaxed kind of a way, but a very knowledgeable guy and a very good communicator. And then bit by bit went into Madrid and started working first as a youth scout, primarily in South America, working on deals to get, he was involved in trying to get Neymar to Madrid, was a big one, and got a reputation as a guy who's very good with people skills. He's very good at going and talking to young players, especially their families, getting the deals done with Brazilian clubs, which is a bit of a minefield, I guess. when European clubs go over to try and deal with the situation in South America, he was somebody who had the contacts and the personality and the experience to be able to do it, and really impressed at Madrid and moved up to get more responsibility and a wider job title within the club, and now is one of the key guys who's involved in deciding where they spend their money, and has been behind a lot of the Madrid's turn towards spending big on people like Rodrigo, Vinicius Junior, who you mentioned there. Instead of maybe Madrid trying to sign Neymar or Mbappe at the very height of their careers, which they may try and do again in the future, it's not completely ruled out. But the idea was to identify who's going to be the best player in 5 years' time and to bring them to the club when they were more relatively affordable, and that he's really associated with that policy at Madrid over the last couple of years.
That's interesting, because you mentioned Florentino Perez, and I was going to ask about his attitude to squad building, because Madrid have obviously skewed younger. So are you saying that is a predetermined strategy, not just a reflection of the market's current state?
It's a bit of both, really, in that Madrid, when they had if we go back maybe to 2014, when they win the Champions League it was 2014, for the first time in so long, the Decima comes, and they already have a squad who are quite young, guys like Cruz came in afterwards, but Varane, Ramos, Marcelo, even Bale, Cristiano Ronaldo, all these guys were coming towards the peak of their career, and then they kept signing new contracts, and the club were spending a lot of money on wages, and it was kind of hard to find better players to come in to replace them. Another 28-year-old who's going to come in and replace a 26-year-old or whatever in the team was difficult. So they did look to kind of prepare for the next team by signing guys who were teenagers or towards the start of their careers. It hasn't gone brilliantly, you'd have to say, but they do have a lot of players who are now maybe coming to fruition. And also, Florentino Perez has gone on record a good few times about saying that they looked at the type of money that Paris Saint-Germain were spending, especially when they signed Neymar, the money that Man City had to sign fullbacks for 60 million, and Madrid said, look, we just can't compete quite at that level anymore. We used to be the team who were able to spend the biggest money to make sure we got the biggest stars here, but the market has changed, and we don't have a big owner who's backing us, or we're not the PR arm of an oil state, so we need to find a different way of doing things. And he was quite open about saying that was at least partly behind the change in policy.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm going to come to you, Alex, in just a moment to discuss some of our picks. But the first one is a backup for Benzema, who I think had a fantastic season. Dermot, can you regale us with who is currently available at the club in that position, or who is a backup for Benzema before we start looking for new people?
Well, Luka Jovic was supposed to be the guy who was to be able to come in and at least give Benzema a rest in some games, and spent 60 million on him from Frankfurt just over 12 months ago. Hasn't worked out for him at all. On the pitch he struggled. He's only scored a couple of goals, and off the pitch he's just kind of stumbled from issue to issue. He's been involved in breaking curfew for the coronavirus. He had some injuries as well, which were unusual that he picked up. But the word around the club is that they still believe in him. Whether that's because if you spent 60 million on somebody, you want to believe in him, but they see a guy who has the qualities to score goals for Madrid, and because he's there right now, they want to give him another chance to score. Also, part of the club is Borja Mayoral, who scored a lot of goals for Spain underage teams and scored some goals for Madrid as a teenager. He's been on loan for the last couple of years at Levante, and his loan is up and he's coming back. So in theory, he could, play the role of a backup striker, but more likely is that they will look to try and sell him and get maybe 10, 15, 20 million, whatever they can, and maybe try and reinvest that in somebody else.
So do you think this is a position that we might see someone come in then, or if they're confident with Jovic for the time being, then possibly not?
Ideally, I'd say they would like to, and Zidane would like to, because there was an awful burden on Benzema to score the goals last year, and he stood up and had an excellent season, both scored and created a lot of goals, but, worried to get injured or worried to go off form, which he has done in other years. He's gone through blips in his career where he hasn't scored so many goals. Were that to happen, they would be in big trouble, because, Hazard hasn't been a reliable source of goals, and you talk about Bale and James and all the other guys that they have. It's putting a lot of faith in Jovic that will come good. And if they could get somebody else alongside that, they could even play two up front sometimes, if they had another striker. I think from a sensible point of view, that it would be a good idea for them to add another scorer if they could.
Lovely nod to the branding there, Dermot. Thank you. Alex, let's have it. A backup for Benzema, please.
Well, I think the key point here is that Benzema is not just a goal scorer. He does so much to facilitate the build-up play, particularly drifting across to the left, linking play fantastically well. He's a very intelligent player, and he's one of these guys who I think is kind of persistently left out of conversations about who the great strikers in European football are, quite unfairly. So finding a backup for him is extremely difficult. I mean, obviously, Kai Havertz is probably going to move to Chelsea, but in terms of the kind of player that they would look for to come in and to be able to do both, he would be a good option. I mean, the two guys that we talked about in the video, probably the one I find more interesting is Carlos Fernandez, who's at Sevilla. He's not good enough yet, but as Dermot says, you're talking about bringing somebody in as a backup. Fernandez is only 24. He's very quick. He's very intelligent. He moves around the pitch an awful lot. He doesn't have to stay in the box as a kind of predatory figure, which is more what you'd want from Jovic if you were going to play two up front anyway. He's the sort of person who drops off, links play, and then uses his speed to get forwards into the box. Not dissimilar in that way to Havertz, who's an extraordinarily quick player. The only issue with Fernandez is he tends to do that more on the right-hand side than on the left, and he is used to playing behind a central striker, Roberto Sodaldo this season. So for Granada, so I mean, I think he's got some of the tactical and technical attributes to play that role, but it is quite a big step up. I also like Gonçalo Paciencia of Eintracht Frankfurt. Eintracht Frankfurt have got two Portuguese players, Paciencia and Andre Silva, who's on loan from AC Milan, and they dovetail really, really nicely. And one of the things about Paciencia is that he, movements-wise, he's very, very similar to Benzema in terms of his drift to the left-hand side, his ability to work with the wide players to kind of be a focal point to link play and then get back into the box to score goals. And I think when you're trying to duplicate someone like Benzema, that's actually more important almost than stats, is you want to look at movement. You want to look at where in the pitch these players crop up to do that kind of linking, and to find somebody who's got the awareness to move around, to be a focal point, not necessarily just in the box. And I think he has got that. Again, it's a big step up, and this is always the problem with, you make a sensible transfers video for Real Madrid and everyone's like, well, we should just sign Mbappe. And it's like, yes, I mean, obviously Mbappe's really good at football, but you can't always just buy the most expensive player, particularly for Real at the moment, and you need to think about what's a kind of like-for-like replacement.
Yeah, it's a shame. I missed that Real Madrid. They were always fun, weren't they? Bit of a sidestep here, though. I'm just curious, why were the club willing to let Achraf Hakimi go, Dermot?
Basically because Dani Carvajal is the first choice right back, and Zidane was happier to have Dani Carvajal starting most of the games ahead of Achraf Hakimi, and they had a conversation about it, and also that the club were looking to bring in some money because of everything that's happened. Madrid had a big hole in their finances, and he was a guy who they knew they could get money from, considering how well he'd gone at Dortmund. Like Zidane and Achraf Hakimi would know each other really, really well, because Achraf was in the youth teams with Zidane's son Luka, so like they'd have a relationship going back about 10 years, and Zidane put him into the team during his first spell as coach at right back, and gave him as an 18-year-old, maybe a 17-year-old, gave him his debut, and at 18 played him quite a lot. So Zidane does rate him, but was almost like they had a man-to-man conversation about what was going to happen, and Zidane said, look, do what's best for yourself, and what's best for Achraf was to go and play regularly somewhere else, probably get more money as well, and that's why he left.
Okay, win-win. Loan players coming back. Will any of them have a first-team role next season? I mean, there are it's a short list we have here: Ceballos, Ødegaard, Reguilon, and also Oscar Rodriguez. Are we expecting anyone to slot into the team, Dermot?
Ødegaard would have the best chance by a long way of those of playing, the majority of the games next season, or a lot of games next season. There are a lot of competition for places there. He's going to, be up against maybe Modric most directly for a place in the team. There's also Valverde, who came through in the last couple of years. But Madrid are keen to get Ødegaard back. They could have left him for another year at Real Sociedad, where he developed really well over the last year, but they said we want to bring him back. The others a lot of it depends on their relationship with Zidane, in that maybe Achraf and Zidane have a good relationship. Dani Ceballos and Sergio Reguilon do not have such a good relationship with Zidane. Just between us, I was speaking to somebody who knows Reguilon very well recently, and it was left very clear that there's no way that Reguilon will go back and play under Zidane. Also, Madrid signed Mendy last summer, and they still have Marcelo as well, so there's no place for Reguilon. So he's another one who Madrid hope to if they can raise maybe 25 million, that'd be great. Ceballos and Zidane also didn't get on so well. Ceballos had a couple of chances to impress under Zidane the first time around, didn't go so well, and Zidane just didn't seem to be a big fan of Ceballos' game, but maybe personality wise they didn't get on so well. So maybe he'll go back to Arsenal, or maybe he'll end up somewhere else. Oscar Rodriguez is another one who maybe Zidane, who I don't know what his relationship is like with Zidane, is the fairest way of putting it, but he did very well at Leganés, but there's a feeling that he's maybe just not quite at the level to play for Madrid, so they'd be hopeful to maybe get some money and maybe have a buyback clause with him and let him play at a higher level than Leganés for a couple of years and see how that goes.
Okay, when we come back, I believe Seb's going to take us through Valencia. We're back. Seb, take us through Valencia.
Yeah, I do really want to take us through Valencia, because what on earth is happening, Dermot? Ferran Torres has gone to Manchester City, which, understandable, but for £20 million seems a bit... I mean, he had, I think, an £18 million release clause in his contract, so that seems a little bit low. Dani Parejo has moved to Villarreal on a free. Francis Coquelin has gone for less than £6 million. Dermot, is Peter Lim trying to antagonise the supporters?
If that's not his exact plan, then he's doing a very good job about it, and has been for a long time, really. Like Peter Lim, remember going back to when Gary Neville was the Valencia coach 4 or 5 years ago now. It's been... I was going to use a word that I shouldn't really use on...
You can use the word that you're not supposed to use.
It's been a shit show at Valencia for a long time, pretty much since Lim took over. Even before he took over, the reason he was able to come into the club was that they had dire financial problems, and he was kind of painted as a saviour who was going to come in and save them from that. That obviously hasn't happened. He's been able to use his own... He's been able to use the club as a place to put some players who he even had, third-party ownership rights of back at one stage when that was still allowed. And it's still a club who does a lot of business with agents who are close to Peter Lim. They were managing to get along okay because Valencia is still such a big club, and they had a lot of very good players who've been there for a while. They won the Copa del Rey last season, but then all that's happened with COVID and everything has hit a hole in their finances, and it's really hurt them because they were just about able to keep moving money from here to there or keep things rolling along just about until now, and now they've just not been able to do it. So there was even a story out in the press that the Valencia players, instead of being paid in August, they got an IOU from the club saying, we'll pay you next year, which didn't go down very well, obviously. And yeah, basically they've just been trying really hard to get people off the wage bill, trying to sell the players like Ferran Torres, who had been alienated as well. The relationship between his agents and the club was not good. Even Ferran Torres himself, who's a prickly character, a guy who's not short of confidence in his own ability, had fallen out with some of the senior players in the dressing room as well. And just everybody's falling out with everybody. And it's sad. If you're a Valencia fan, it's sad. And even as a neutral or somebody who, you well, respect for the club, it's a great Spanish club and it's going through a really difficult time. And it's difficult to overstate really just how much of a mess that the club is in.
Yeah, so picking up on that Ferran Torres personality, his exit interview was one of the spikiest I've ever read from a player. He, I forget where it was published, but he basically threw Dani Parejo under the bus. Why was that? What happened between them? I think by memory he accused him of not being a good captain or something, or there's clearly something personal between them. So what was the genesis of that feud?
Yeah, it was a remarkable interview by Ferran Torres in Marca, and he really did. He held nothing back. He had a good go at the club, and at Parejo as well. Said he wasn't a very good captain, and the relationship in the dressing room between the older players, Parejo's the captain. He's been there for a long time, and some of the younger players like Ferran Torres and Kang In Lee as well. The the Korean, who's also a very good player but hasn't really had a chance to show it yet, was not good. Torres, he just grew very frustrated with what was going on. He wasn't happy with what was going on at the club. I don't know, to be honest, the genesis of the personal problem between Parejo and Torres, but it just kind of shows that everybody is at each other's throats at Valencia, whether it's Torres. It's not that Torres was happy with the club and siding with the owners of the club against Parejo. They're both unhappy with the owners of the club, just in different ways, and everybody has their own problems to deal with there. So they're just kind of all falling apart. Maybe it was a little bit of inexperience on his part to come out and do that, but he felt so strongly about it. And he's a guy who, a lot of, for 10 years, he's been the guy who Valencia fans have had a lot of hopes for. Everybody knew about him coming through. He was brilliant for Spain underage teams. He was a star of Spain under 19 teams who won he scored 2 goals, I think, in the final. Might be corrected on that, but his big performances for Spain was huge for Valencia, and could have moved to Barcelona, could have moved to England, could have moved to Real Madrid, but stayed at Valencia because he wanted to come through at his hometown club. He was super frustrated with the way that it ended. His agents and the club had really bad relationship with some of the sporting directors and with the owners of the club. So it just ended really, really bitterly. And I guess he felt that he wasn't getting the respect that he deserved from either from the club or from the senior players who had their own issues and had their own problems and maybe weren't as worried about Ferran Torres' problems as Ferran Torres was himself.
So talking of senior players, obviously there are still an awful lot of very well-admired players at Valencia. So someone like Jose Gaya, Goncalo Guedes, Jasper Cillessen is still there, Denis Cheryshev. Is this going to become a fire sale, Dermot? I mean, there's a lot of players. For instance, if Maxi Gomez was to come onto the market, I'm sure there'd be plenty of suitors for him at centre forward. Like, what's next here? Is Peter Lim done with his super villainy, or is there more to come this summer?
I think there's definitely more to come. The Valencia would like to keep Gaia and Carlos Soler, who's another really good youngster who they have, and use them maybe as the core of a new team. Everybody else basically is up for sale, and who knows what will happen. Gaia wouldn't be a bad replacement for Jordi Alba at Barcelona if that were needed, and if something could be done there. But Valencia would really like to keep hold of them, both because they are very good players and also because they're very popular with the fans. Maybe the last link between the team, because even as the fans have grown very disillusioned with the ownership, they did keep a very close link to the team, to people like Parejo, like Gaia as well, so that they kept the fans on side, which is really important. Well, it would especially be important if fans are let back into the club, but just to avoid everything going over the edge completely, to keep that link was good. So they would like to the owners are aware of that and would like to keep that, but who knows really what will happen.
Okay, let's chat about Atletico Madrid. And Alex, I'm going to ask you about Ivo Grbic, whose keeper has been signed from Lokomotiv Zagreb, and he popped up in our video series. So, I mean, before you tell me more about him, can I double check, as a man who doesn't know the answer to a question he's about to ask? Jan Oblak is staying, as far as we know, or is he leaving? And I've missed that.
No, I think he's staying.
So Ivo Grbic is a backup keeper.
Yeah, yes, he will be. But there's something about. So I came across Grbic when I was looking for a goalkeeper for Sheffield United, actually, and he's an extraordinary talent. There's something quite Oblak-y about him. He's very big. He's very physically dominant. He's got quite a kind of upright posture. Very dominant coming for crosses. I think he's 6'5". He's 24. Hasn't received a full Croatian national team call-up yet, but it is very much in the water. It's a matter of time. And for a pretty bad Lokomotiv Zagreb side, his saves to shots ratio was extraordinary. Unfortunately, the data that I have for the Croatian top tier isn't that fulsome, so it's hard to know. But he looks like a really strong, physically adept, technically good goalkeeper who was sort of, I think, kind of slightly under the radar. And I hadn't seen, when I recommended him for Sheffield United, I hadn't seen him linked with any other clubs. So I don't know whether Atletico Madrid are particularly strong at scouting Eastern European goalkeepers, or whether he was somebody that, had kind of cropped into the radar because of some other competition. I don't know how they found him. Maybe his agent sent them an email. Yeah. But he looks like he's got everything that it would take to become a top level goalkeeper.
That's nice to know.
He's also pretty good with his feet as well. I mean, his distribution is not bad for somebody who's so tall and a kind of quite an old school goalkeeper.
Yeah.
He's a competent distributor of the ball as well. It's a really good signing.
Interesting insight there. Can I say some interesting insight from me? My favourite tweet ever is now the tweet of the video of that alligator sort of slowly moving across the camera screen in the water in the shape of Manuel Neuer coming out to save yet another one-on-one. I watched it about 6 times, and it's really very funny. So, there you go. I've explained to you a thing that is funny in a non-funny way. Miscellaneous stuff now. Alex, I'm coming back to you. Hueska and Cadiz are coming up from La Liga 2, and Elche beat Girona in the playoff final. Are there any players within those sides that you want to flag for potential or for impact, or anyone that's interesting?
Yeah, there are some interesting players. I'll take you through this as quickly as I possibly can. Starting with Elche, who play mostly in a 5-3-2 or a 3-4-3. Juan Cruz, their left back, is really, really good, or left wing back. 26 years old, 9 assists, very dynamic, very quick, lovely long hair. Josima, who is their left centre back, but can also play as a left back. He's a very tall, very composed defender, good passer of the ball, brings it out nicely. And the kind of cult hero there is a guy called Nino, who is their centre-forward, who played every minute, I think, of last season and is 40 years old, and is a sort of slightly tubby little chap who drops off, links play really well, and also popped up with 7 goals. Whether he will continue in La Liga is, I guess, up for debate.
A tubby 40-year-old.
Well, yeah, okay. He's not tubby, but he doesn't.
I can't imagine anything like that. I mean, I've spent,
He doesn't scream natural athleticism, put it that way.
Seb, you've hurt your back, haven't you? And you're getting on.
Yeah, I just heard the description myself. Yeah. That wasn't kind at all.
Okay.
Moving on to Hueska, who play mostly in a 4-2-3-1. They had Shinji Okazaki there, who scored 12 goals for them, who Leicester fans will remember. The standout players, I think Rafa Mir, who's on loan from Wolves, will be really interesting to watch as a striker. But the 2 guys, Eugenie Valderrama, who's can play as a defensive midfielder, but occasionally pops up slightly further up the pitch. Really, really nice passer of the ball. Only 26 years old, 3 goals, 4 assists. Just a very clever midfielder who sprays it around, knows when to try something more adventurous, knows when to keep the ball. And Jorge Pulido, who's the captain, as the centre-back as well. 2 goals and 4 assists from him. He's a ball-carrying centre-back, brings it out really neatly. Again, a good range of passing, very intelligent player. And lastly, Cadiz, they've kind of got one star guy, really, who's Alex Fernandez, who plays either as a central midfielder in a 4-2-3-1 or as the attacking midfielder. 13 goals, but he was their penalty taker last season. Also got 6 assists. Really, really nice long-range passer of the ball. Fantastic at switching the play from one flank to the other. They've also got a guy called Sanchez, who's the right winger, who got 9 assists. And a striker called Choco Lozano, who got 9 goals for them while on loan from Girona. He's now signed permanently now that they've gone up. They've got quite a big squad, and they've been really active in the transfer market, unlike Elche, who haven't made a single signing as far as I can tell. Cadiz have brought in Alvaro Negredo, the former Man City and Middlesbrough striker, who was at Al Nassr in the UAE, and is now at 35 years old playing for Cadiz. So I think they probably will want to trim their squad a little bit because it's quite sizable.
Well, good for Alvaro, hey? Listen, that's the end of the La Liga Sensible Transfers podcast. Thanks so much for listening. And thanks to you, Dermot Corrigan, for attending.
Cheers, guys.
And, of course, Alex and Seb, thanks to you also.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe.
We'll be back in a few days' time with another thing that is similar but not quite the same as this. Goodbye.